big picture, and you guys are probably wondering what this has to do with entrepreneurship and or research and or me. This is an aerial photograph of the border of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So the right side of the picture where you see all the green is the Dominican Republic. The left side of the picture where you see all the brown is Haiti. And the reason for the stark difference in color is the island of, or the part of the island that is called Haiti is actually 98% deforested. So over the last about 50 years, through some pretty unsustainable farming practices and the fact that they use charcoal made from trees to do all their cooking, they basically stripped the whole island of any resource of trees. You may be asking again, what does this have to do with anything? Well, this is kind of a pretty interesting background to what I do in social entrepreneurship. I am, as Gina said, a graduate student in both civil engineering and the ESTEEM program. I did 2 years of civil engineering before I joined the ESTEEM program, and I've been working on a project in Haiti that specifically has to do with housing, and in specific response to the big earthquake in 2010. So kind of how this ends up having anything to do with civil engineering and earthquakes is this picture. So this is a picture from immediately after the earthquake in a small city that I work in Haiti called Leogane. And as you can see in the foreground of this picture, there's a structure that completely collapsed. This was a 3-story concrete masonry structure, probably not more than 10 years old, and as you can see, it didn't do too well in a relatively moderate earthquake. In the background, you can see a structure that is actually over 100 years old. This was built in the late 1800s, kind of in the French colonial area of Haiti. Haiti was originally conquered by the French. And as you can see, it basically didn't suffer any damage from the actual earthquake. And the reason is that there's a big difference between this structure and this structure, and it's that this one was made out of masonry and concrete. This one's actually made out of wood. So if you think about, if you go to California, most people design earthquake-resistant homes with wood frame structures. That's what we used to build in the US. And as you can see, it's really effective at actually riding out earthquakes. Now this might fall down tomorrow because of rocking and kind of the weather, but for some reason the 7.0 magnitude earthquake didn't take it down. In the foreground, you can see that pretty modern earthquake took something, what we call almost modern by today's standards, down actually relatively quickly. So the reason and the way I got involved with this project is Notre Dame has a big presence in Haiti, and we had sent some civil engineers down there after the earthquake to do some assessments of schools and hospitals that Notre Dame had in the area. Okay, and we noticed that the big killer in the earthquake was actually housing. And the main reason for this is this exact picture. People build with concrete and masonry, but don't detail it and don't reinforce it enough to actually handle earthquakes. So even small structures, 1-story structures made out of masonry came down during the earthquake. And when masonry comes down, it becomes very dangerous to those inside, as you can imagine, and it ended up killing a lot of the people that were killed in the earthquake. Now, the other side of the story is there's also over 1 million people left homeless after the earthquake. About 10% of Haiti's population was without housing. And again, this comes to the fact that most people build like this because it's easy and it's cheap and it's available. But there wasn't any kind of overall governing structure on how do you build and how can you do it in a way that actually keeps people safe. So we kind of jumped in and said, okay, that's kind of the problem. Housing is the problem. Housing in Haiti is the problem. Like, what would it take to come up with a solution, and what would it take to come up with a sustainable solution? I think as David was talking about this idea of social entrepreneurship, how can you create organizations that have social focus, that try to do good for the community and at large, but are sustained by good business? And so we said, okay, from the get-go, let's set a high goal and see if we actually do housing in Haiti as a business, as opposed to a Red Cross model or Habitat for Humanity model. And this is kind of where you get to, I call it the Apollo 13 moment. You know the scene in Apollo 13 where they bring in the box and it's got like duct tape, like a tarp, maybe a pencil and throw it on, this is what you have to work with. You need to fix this really important problem. In some ways, our problem is not a whole lot different in that the box that we're getting as tools and constraints to do this is really small. And there's kind of 4 main areas that I like to talk about as far as what like actually actually affects the problem of housing in Haiti? What do you have to look at? The first one is obviously the hazards. So the first one you talk about earthquakes, you're talking about hurricanes, you're talking about floods, and you're talking about your being on the equator. So you're kind of worst case scenario as far as protecting yourself from the elements. There's not many places in the world that have all four of those in the kind of magnitude that Haiti does. Now the second thing, and this may be why you're asking questions to yourself about entrepreneurship and running this as a business in Haiti is also the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So average incomes are somewhere between $400 and $500 a year, and they're informal income. So it's not like they're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. It's I'm going to go to the market and be my own entrepreneur and kind of barter and sell, and hopefully I can bring enough money home to be able to keep things running in the household. So we have a really, really constrained target market in the fact of how much money we can actually put towards something like housing. Additionally, there's not a whole lot of mortgages floating around Haiti, not a whole lot of lending going on to people who can't make more than $500 a year and can't really prove that they're even making $500 a year. So the whole kind of system that we use to build homes that cost a lot more than what we can pay for out of pocket doesn't even exist there. The third area of constraints is kind of capacity constraints. We're talking about capacity both in the materials available and in the skill sets available. So as you can imagine, and from that first slide, the best option would be to build with wood. They would ride out the earthquakes and you'd be fine, and as you can see, they can last 100 years, no problem. The problem is there's no wood. And trying to import wood into Haiti is more of a headache than any of us want to take on. So the question is how can we do it with local materials? Basically, how can we reconfigure this into something that actually works during an earthquake? Now, we also have capacity constraints. So you have masons, you have the construction crews that currently do this stuff in Haiti. How can you train them and make sure that they know what to look for when building a home, that you get some safety built in? And finally, we have one, probably, arguably from my perspective, the most important constraint, which is the cultural constraint. And that is, not everybody likes to live in the same kind of home. If you go across the world, homes look very different for multiple reasons. If you go to kind of the South Pacific, you're looking at cultures where large extended families live all together in one home, and probably in one large room. Come all the way to the U.S., and we have very highly partitioned homes with maybe 10 rooms in it, and we're only talking about an immediate family, maybe 3 or 4 people. And so there's some cultural aspects to housing that you also have to address. There's been things offered for Haiti as solutions like shipping containers. We take shipping containers down there and make them into homes. Well, it would work from the fact that we can get shipping containers and it's cheap and rapidly deployable and all these things, but if you go to talk to people in Haiti and ask them if they want to live in a shipping container, most of them look at you like you're crazy. So you also need to take into this kind of constraint of what are people willing to buy, and that's really where you get that social entrepreneurship aspect of it. Is you have a target market, what can you create that they're actually willing to part money with in order for you to build a home that's safe and sustainable. So that's kind of a big picture overview of the project that I'm working on. Right now it's myself. We have 2 advisors, both civil engineering faculty here at Notre Dame. But I think a big piece of probably why I'm talking about this today is because I think in general undergraduates' expressions to research professors and getting involved is kind of like this from the Sandlot, looking into that big dog, where it's like you don't really know what's going on the other side of the fence and you're terrified of it. And I think that's a barrier that is there, but it's kind of unfounded, just like the end of Sandlot, they love the dog, and the dog's fine. So I think part of the reason that I wanted to talk, especially to the undergrads, is that it is possible to get involved with projects like this, and it's possible to do it from day one when you're a freshman and you think you don't know anything. And there's actually professors that really enjoy having you on the project, because I think as David mentioned, that kind of dynamic is switching, and we're seeing a lot of good ideas come from students because of how students think these days and the rapid kind of access you have to technology and information. So kind of the cool part of our project, besides the whole Haiti thing, is we actually have 22 total undergrads that have some involved in our project. And they're not all engineers. We have civil engineers, we have mechanical engineers, we have political scientists, we have a finance major, we have an architect, we have an environmental engineer, and they're not all doing things that you would think they would be doing in their major. Our mechanical engineer actually does survey analysis on all the surveys that we run, and we talk to people about what they want to do with So he can come in here and tell you what someone who is a female with 4 kids and rents in Haiti would be looking for at home, which probably isn't what his mom thought she was sending here to learn. But the reason that he got involved with this is because he saw it, he thought it was interesting, and he decided to walk in the office and ask about it. And I think that is kind of one of the biggest barriers between research and entrepreneurship being kind of this high-level university kind of goal, and all this human capital, 8,000 students that we have here, that could actually contribute to that in a meaningful way if we just kind of paired the two of them up. And so part of the talk I wanted to spend on was actually talking to the undergrads about how do you become someone like this, where you're involved in a project right away from freshman year, or right before you're ready to walk out the door. We have one girl who's helping us out with savings programs and Haiti, who literally will graduate in 3 weeks, but she's been working on the project for 3 weeks. So there's always time to get involved, and there's always important things that you can do. And so kind of the process to do this, I want to make it really simple. So I think it'd be first, if you're an undergrad and you want to get involved with stuff, you have no idea where to go, no idea what to do, is to start with writing down the sentence and filling in the blank. Because I think too often we're constrained to think that if I'm a civil engineer, therefore I have to be involved in civil engineering research. Otherwise, I won't have the expertise necessary to contribute in a meaningful way. That's not true at all. If you look at kind of where success comes from a whole bunch of different backgrounds coming together to solve a problem and taking different perspectives. And you're here to learn as an undergrad, so there's no other better way to learn than just kind of jump in with 2 feet. So the first step is to fill out the sentence. The second step is to go to md.edu. There's a little search bar up here, and just plug in whatever you feel is right and hit search. And there's probably a pretty good chance that maybe not your first passion, maybe not your second, but the third one, something you're interested in, there's somebody at Notre Dame that's working on it, and they're probably really good at it, because we tend to attract some pretty good professors here. So once you get that, then there's just a simple 5 steps you need to do. First is write down their name. Second, write down your name. Third, write down what your passion was that you plugged into that search bar. Ask yourself to explain in one sentence why it's your passion, why are you interested in this, what's important about it to you. And finally, what are you good at? You know, this may be what your degree program is, this may not be what your degree program is, but all those things that kind of make you you and what you feel you offer to a table, write that down as well. And then kind of in the Sandlot mantra, I want you to take you back to like 3rd grade when you get those little books, the Mad Libs books. You know, you fill out like 6 adjectives and then you plug it with a little story and something really funny comes out. Well, hopefully instead of something really funny, actually something really cool comes out of this. So you take these 5 things and you plug it into this really simple email. It says, "Dear professor's name, my name is your name," whatever that may be. "I've heard about your research in blank. This is where you put your passion. I'm really interested in it because of this," which is number 4 on the list. "I have a background in this, and I'd love to sit down to see if there's a way for me to become involved. Sincerely, your name again." And I bet you 5 times out of 10, you'll get someone who will answer you within a day. 2 times out of 10, it'll take them 2 or 3 days because they let their inboxes be like 1,000 messages, so they won't find it for a few days. But I guarantee by the end of 3 weeks, you'll probably get a response from all 10 of those professors. And they'll probably be really interested to hear why you're interested in the project. From kind of a selfish perspective, they love undergraduate students because it's free labor. So you can kind of tell them to do whatever you want. They'll just go do it because they're interested in the project. But on the other hand, they can come up with really good ideas. And a lot of the good ideas we've had over the last 2 years, none of us that were involved can take credit for because we had this huge team of 22 people that kind of came together as a group, threw around crazy ideas, and are really now to a place where I'm moving to Haiti next year after I graduate in August to try to start this. So it can really happen this quickly. This isn't exactly how I got involved, but it's really close. There's an email in my sent box from 3 years ago that looks a little bit like this, which I got a response within 10 minutes that said, "Do you want to stay for an extra 2 years and do your master's degree in this project?" And 3 years later, I was in Haiti. So don't underestimate the power of just asking to get involved, and don't underestimate the power of getting involved in something that you're interested in and has nothing to do with your major, because I think that's where kind of the coolest opportunities come from. Thank you.